The cursor blinked. Once, twice. Andrew stared at the spreadsheet until the rows bled into a single gray blur. It was 3 p.m., the hour where the day usually died. His eyelids felt like sheets of lead, dragging down with every slow breath. He tried to focus on the data, but his stomach churned, a sharp, acidic reminder of the greasy burger he had forced down at noon. It sat like a stone, sapping the energy from his limbs. He slumped back, his spine curving into the hard plastic of the chair. The office air felt thick, stagnant, and heavy. He tapped his fingers against the desk, but the rhythm was dead. Nothing was moving. Not the project, not his thoughts, not his progress. He looked at the screen again, trying to force a single cell to compute, but his mind simply refused to engage. Success felt like a distant country, one he had no map to reach. He looked at the clock. The second hand ticked forward, mocking him. Another hour of this, and another, and he had nothing to show for it. He pressed his palms into his eyes, rubbing until sparks danced in the dark, but the exhaustion remained, anchored deep in his chest. A shadow crossed the threshold of the office. Andrew did not look up until a hand rested firmly on his shoulder. He turned, blinking against the harsh overhead light. His mentor stood there, eyes scanning the desk, moving from the half-empty spreadsheet to the crumpled, grease-stained paper sitting near the keyboard. The mentor tapped the wrapper. The sound was sharp, cutting through the hum of the cooling fans. Andrew waited for a critique of his performance, for a demand to finish the report, but the words that followed shifted the room entirely. The mentor leaned in, voice low and steady. Success is not only about what enters your mind, it is about what enters your body. Andrew looked at the trash. He looked at his own trembling hands. The mentor did not wait for a response, simply turned and walked out, leaving the office door wide open. The silence that filled the space was different now. It was no longer the heavy, stagnant silence of failure. It was a space waiting to be filled. Andrew looked back at the empty wrapper, then at his own reflection in the darkened monitor. The fatigue in his eyes remained, but the fog began to lift. For the first time all day, he saw the link between the sludge in his stomach and the stall in his work. Andrew reached out and crumpled the grease-stained wrapper into a tight ball. He tossed it into the wastebasket, watching it land with a hollow thud. That sound finalized the decision. He had been treating his body like a furnace for low-grade coal, dumping waste into his system and wondering why the engine sputtered. He stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked to the window. The city moved below him, purposeful and fast. He made a quiet, firm vow to change the fuel. He left the office, his pace steady, and headed straight for the market. The aisles were bright, lined with colors he usually ignored. He bypassed the pre-packaged shelves and moved to the produce section. He selected firm heads of greens, handfuls of fresh herbs, and lean proteins that felt solid in his hands. He grabbed a cooler, testing its weight, imagining it filled with the fuel he needed to sustain his focus. Each item he placed in the basket was a deliberate choice. He was no longer just buying groceries. He was gathering the tools for a new version of his day. He checked out, the receipt showing the cost of his commitment, and walked out into the cooling evening air with a clear plan for tomorrow. The next day at noon, Andrew pulled a container from his bag and set it on his desk. He opened the lid. The steam rose in a thin, steady curl. He ate slowly, chewing each mouthful of chicken and greens, noting the lack of the usual heavy, sluggish sensation in his chest. Beside the container sat a glass of water, cold and clear. He pushed the soda machine from his mind entirely. By 2 p.m., the familiar fog that usually clouded his thoughts failed to arrive. He looked at the spreadsheet, and the numbers no longer swam. They aligned. He tapped the keys with precision, every motion deliberate. By 4 p.m., he reached the final row of the report. He did not slump. He did not rub his eyes. He hit the save button, closed the file, and felt a quiet, sharp sense of victory. The work that had taken him hours of struggle yesterday was now complete. Finished in record time. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and moved with a lightness that surprised him. He grabbed his keys, walked toward the exit, and stepped out into the hallway. The change was not just a feeling, it was a measurable result. He had fueled the engine, and the engine was finally running. 1 day became 3. 3 became 7. Andrew kept the pace, repeating the act of packing his lunch every single night. The cooler became a permanent fixture in his routine, a box of tools that anchored his productivity. He bypassed the office vending machines without a second glance, his focus locked on the sustained clarity he had discovered. By the end of the second week, the physical lethargy that once defined his afternoons was entirely gone. His sleep quality improved, turning his nights into genuine recovery rather than just unconscious time. He woke up earlier, his mind sharp before he even stepped into the office. The momentum grew. He felt a consistent, steady hum of energy that lasted from sunrise until the workday ended. He no longer waited for the weekend to move his body. He began jogging in the evenings, his feet hitting the pavement in rhythm with his newfound resolve. The city lights blurred as he ran, his breath coming in deep, controlled intervals. He was building a different version of himself, one brick of discipline at a time. The results were no longer just on the screen. They were in the strength of his legs and the steady pace of his heart. It was a Sunday evening, the kitchen quiet except for the rhythmic sound of a knife against a cutting board. Andrew was portioning a scent raiwan fai and vegetables into individual containers. His daughter stood in the doorway, watching him. She had seen him do this every night for weeks. She walked over, peering into the cooler he had laid out on the counter. She asked, "Why do you always bring food from home? Is it just because you like the taste better?" Andrew paused. He set the container down and looked at her. He smiled, not with a quick, fleeting expression, but with the steady clarity of a man who had found his direction. He said, "Because I am investing." She tilted her head, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Investing in what?" she asked. Andrew leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed but firm. He replied, "My future." The words hung in the air. He did not explain it as a diet or a chore. He presented it as a calculation, a deliberate move to ensure he had the strength and focus to build the life he wanted. She watched him seal the lid, the click of the plastic final and precise. She did not ask again. She saw that he was no longer just preparing a meal. He was securing his own potential. The conversation with his daughter remained with him long after the kitchen lights went out. He looked at his lunchbox the next morning, but he did not see just a meal. He saw a strategic choice. The era of choosing food for the fleeting pleasure of a second was over. He no longer asked what tasted good. He asked what would sustain him for a lifetime. This was the shift he had been searching for. He realized that Napoleon Hill was right. Wealth might begin in the mind, but the mind requires a strong vessel to house it. He had spent years trying to build a career while neglecting the very engine that powered his ambition. No more. He treated every ingredient with the care of an investor reviewing a portfolio. Fresh greens, lean proteins, clean water, these were the assets he deposited into his body to guarantee a return on his focus. He felt the weight of his previous habits fall away, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He was not just fueling up, he was hardening his resolve. Every calorie served a purpose. Every meal was a brick in the foundation of his future. He was becoming the architect of his own capacity. And for the first time, he knew exactly what he was capable of achieving. The discipline he cultivated at the table bled into every other hour of his day. It was not a sudden explosion, but a relentless, rising tide. Because he no longer fought the fog of poor nutrition, his focus became a sharp, unwavering tool. He approached his projects with the same analytical precision he used to pack his meals. The results followed. The report that once took him days to finish now lay completed hours ahead of the deadline. His bank account, once stagnant, began to climb as his productivity drew the attention of his peers and superiors. He saw the pattern clearly now. His physical state was the lever that moved his professional world. He found himself jogging in the evenings, lungs expanding, blood pumping with a vigor he had not felt in years. His health was no longer a variable he ignored. It was a baseline he maintained with pride. He looked at his reflection and saw a man who had mastered the connection between his internal fuel and his external output. The chaos of his previous life had been replaced by a quiet, ironclad order. He had built the vessel, and now, the vessel was delivering the life he had only once dared to imagine. He stopped looking at his progress as a finish line. Success was not a point to reach. It was a distance to cover. It was a marathon that demanded more than just raw ambition. It required a constant, reliable source of power. He reflected on the man he had been, that version of himself who expected peak output while providing only the barest, lowest quality fuel. That man was gone. In his place stood someone who understood the mechanics of his own performance. He looked at the week ahead, seeing it not as a series of obstacles, but as a grueling race that he was now fully equipped to run. His ambition was the engine, but his discipline was the oil that kept it from seizing. He understood now that he could not sprint through a lifetime of work on empty. He felt the surge of energy in his limbs, a steady, rhythmic hum of vitality that refused to fade by late afternoon. He had moved beyond the need for quick motivation. He had built a life sustained by the choices he made every single hour. He was no longer just working, he was enduring, pacing himself for the long haul, ready to outlast any challenge that stood in his path. The clock on the wall ticked toward the end of the day, but the familiar heavy fog never arrived. Andrew rested his hands on the desk and looked down at his lunchbox. It was a simple, functional object, but it held the weight of his entire transformation. He did not need to rush, nor did he need to force himself through the final hours. The energy in his muscles was consistent, a silent testament to the choices he had made. He closed the lid with a soft, deliberate click. No more greasy wrappers, no more midday crashes. He stood up, adjusted his chair, and looked out the window at the horizon. The future was no longer a looming mystery that demanded his anxiety. It was a path he was prepared to walk. He felt the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat, a reminder that his vessel was strong and fully fueled. He had learned the secret that most spent their lives ignoring. He was not just ready for the next hour or the next report. He was ready for the years to come. With a final, calm nod to the empty room, he turned away from the desk, his movements precise and purposeful, fully prepared for whatever challenge tomorrow would bring.